Hi, it's Dr. Craig Duncan, and you're listening to the Bezan podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to a new Bezan podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Craig Duncan, former sports scientist for the Iranian national team under Carlos Queiroz. He worked for the Iranian national team at the Asian Cup in 2019. Joining me today on the panel is Sina Saemian. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thank you, Arya. It's good to speak to you, and I'm looking forward to speaking to Dr. Duncan as well.
Dr. Duncan, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm really well. How are you?
Very good. Really appreciate you coming on today. We've interviewed quite a few of the national team staff under Carlos Queiroz. We've had Mark Arya on, Lopez, the goalkeeping coach. It's really good to kind of get the kind of wee anecdotes that they kind of give us, but especially from your perspective, being working with the Australian national team in the past. The first question I'm going to start with you, though, just to get away from that. Sina, you're going to start off with that question, so we'll kick off.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really basic one to kick things off. I just wanted you to kind of go through your background and how did you get into football to begin with, and also what does your role actually entail, because there will be a lot of football fans that might not be too familiar with the sports science kind of things, of especially in the last few years as we've become more popular. So give us a little background in regards to that, please.
Yeah, no problem at all. And thanks very much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. But look, I played football myself, and so from there, when I realized I wasn't good enough to have a professional career, I studied sports science. So I went straight into studying sports science and did my undergraduate degree in sports science, and then my postgraduate work, and then I have a PhD in sports science, and then also I studied psychology as well and did postgraduate work in there and philosophy. So I have quite an extensive education background in the field, and then I apply it all to football. So then working extensively through professional football for the last 20 plus years in Australia and then around the world. So I've been doing that for quite a long time now. And I suppose sports science, what is it? It's really taking into account all aspects of the physical, and I probably extend out into the psychological preparation of players. So I probably even turn more from sports science into human performance. So I really focus on the entire integrated approach of the athlete performing on the pitch.
Excellent. So one of the things that we kind of obviously saw from your biography, especially on your website, you worked with the Western Sydney Wanderers. You obviously won the Asian Champions League with them in 2014. Can you go through that experience and kind of how, obviously your first experience, I'm sure, winning a big trophy. Is that right?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'd been involved in winning national competitions, but that was a big competition for a team that had only been started a couple of years before then. So probably only a year before had that team been formed. So it's an incredible story, and it was such a long process to get to those games, and particularly from the quarterfinal into the semi-final and into the final. And it was with a very good coach, Tony Popovich, a young coach at the time. And so he just really led this team, a hard-working team that just really grinded out results based on having very good physical condition. And the preparation was difficult because, in actual fact, the season ends in Australia, and that's with the round of 16 game, and then you've got the gap in time leading into the quarterfinal, into the semi-final, and into the final. So it was very, very enjoyable, but also a very good staff there. The fitness coach, Adam Watterson, was excellent as well, and I was advising them and helping with the program and helping where I could. And you probably remember that second leg in Saudi Arabia, which was just incredible, and an amazing goalkeeping performance from a goalkeeper, Ante Kovic, I remember. And so it was a very fortunate win, and you have to have luck in football, but I think well deserved overall, but a great experience. And I think one that will be very difficult for any Australian team to do again in the future.
Fantastic, and it's great to see that you've obviously done that, and then you obviously moved on to the actual national team of Australia, where you were working with them at the Asian Cup in 2015, which they actually won. That was in their home country.
Yeah, I mean, that was what a great experience, working, I suppose, for my country. And look, I wasn't involved in the 2014 World Cup. They didn't have a good 2014 World Cup. It was a young team, but again, a very, very good coach, Ange Postecoglou, and he just really drove that team. I remember clearly thinking, gee, just to work the way through the group stages, at no stage did I think that we could really win that tournament. But I suppose I never think like that. I'm always thinking, working just one game ahead and making sure the team is prepared physically as well as it could be. But gee, it was you wouldn't have thought that we could win that at the start. Iran were an outstanding team, Japan, South Korea. And we were fortunate. Iran and Japan got knocked out early, and then we played South Korea in the final, and then won in extra time. And again, a very good physically prepared side, hard-working side with a very good coach, and it was great. I mean, that was in my home city in front of 80,000 people, and to win in extra time was just an amazing story. So it was very good, very, very enjoyable.
We'll touch on the World Cup experience that you had as well, but just before that, I want to obviously speak to you a little bit more about the Asian Cup from an Iranian standpoint. Iran obviously were knocked out by Iraq, and obviously one of the main talking points from that game was the referee, Benjamin Williams, who had previously been refereeing for us earlier on in the tournament. I think it was against Bahrain. Carlos Queiroz had a little bit of a spat with him, and then we got him again in the later rounds. What's your kind of your thought process on that?
Well, I do know that his name is in folklore and Iranian football, because I was asked many times about Ben Williams when I worked with Iran. Look, he's not my favorite referee. In actual fact, I'll tell you a funny story. He's my mum's least favorite referee. So look, he's I can't remember exactly what happened for the Iran-Iraq game. I know it was very controversial, and I can't say too much about it, but I can probably understand the thoughts that the Iran people have about that referee. Even though I must say I will say this, that he's a decent person, so that's a good thing maybe.
Just a little thing to tell you more about AFC's kind of organization skills in these situations. Obviously after the Iraq game and all the commotion, as you said, in regards to Ben Williams, he was then appointed to referee an Iranian club in the AFC Champions League 4 months later. It was Fulad, I think it was against Al Sadd of Qatar, and there was such a kind of huge backlash from the Iranian point of view that the AFC then had to remove him as a referee, which then begs the question, surely after that kind of performance, and the country's already kind of got those images still in their heads over that refereeing performance, why would you appoint him to referee the game in Iran for an Iranian club? But then again, I think that says a lot more about AFC than about Williams himself.
Yeah, I mean, that's, referees don't appoint themselves to games, so it is, I mean, you just think, just even for the referee's safety in some respects. And yeah, so, I mean, yeah, like incredible. I didn't realize that. So yeah, that was incredible. But I mean, at the time, it was fortunate for Australia that Iran got knocked out.
I think actually Iran and Australia were the only, I think, out of the major countries that had a sense of continuity, where Australia had Postecoglou prior to the World Cup, and of course with the Asian Cup being only 6 months later, and Iran had Queiroz, where I think South Korea and Japan had both appointed new managers. So I assume that would have helped Australia as well, not having to deal with a new manager, new kind of staff coming in, and try and prepare for an Asian Cup on home soil with only 4 or 5 months in hand.
Yeah, even though actually I only came in 2 months before the Asian Cup, I was lucky that I actually knew a lot of the staff already there. But I only came in that FIFA window in November, so we had to do a lot of work between then and January and to really get right. So it wasn't easy, but things just fell in our place. And in tournaments, the secret is to try and stay as fresh as possible and to stay physically as good as possible. And I think that's really enhanced that situation for us in 2015.
And of course, you stayed with the team after the Asian Cup triumph, and you went on to obviously help the team not just reach the 2018 World Cup, but you were involved in the actual tournament as well. So it seems like it was a longer term project for yourself, of course, being with the team for almost 4 years. So how did that feel?
Yeah, look, I really wanted to do one cycle, like a complete cycle for a World Cup. It was incredible. And qualifying in Asia is difficult. You have those first round of matches, and where we played in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Bangladesh, and they seem like easy games, but they're not, because you've got so many different travel issues, and like Iran, Australia, nearly all Australian players play in Europe. So you've always, even home games are like away games. So you've got to contest with travel, difference in climate, and Asia's very, very strong. So it was a difficult campaign, and we didn't get through. Japan and Saudi got through as number 1 and 2, and then we got that place where we then had to play Syria, and we played Syria home and away, or the home game was in Malaysia for them, and then we played them at home, and we were lucky to win in extra time. And in actual fact, their striker had a free kick, the last kick of the game, and hit the post, and we would have been gone on away goals. So it was very difficult, and that Syrian team, I think, had come off playing Iran. And then we had to go to Honduras, and Honduras was an extensive travel. And I mean, that's my field, the travel, the sleep, adapting to climates and all that, and getting the players right to perform. But to get to Honduras was a very difficult experience. Had a 0-0 result there, and then came back and it was still 0-0 at halftime. And then fortunately we got 3 second half goals and were able to go through to the 2018 World Cup. So that was again exciting in front of in my hometown. To qualify was wonderful, and then to go to Russia was good. Even though that was an interesting one, because Postecoglou stopped coaching us before the World Cup. So we got a new coaching staff, Bert van Marwijk, who had taken Holland to the World Cup final in, I think it was 2010. And he was great, and his team were great to work with, and I still stay in contact with them to this day. And things could have gone better at that World Cup. We lost 2-1 to France when they scored a late goal in the 80th plus minute. We probably should have beaten Denmark, where we had a 1-1 result, and then we went down to Peru 2-0. But I think that could have been different if the game against Denmark had gone differently. But they're World Cups, aren't they? They're difficult, and you need to take your opportunities when they come.
Maybe one of the bright spots of that World Cup for Australia was, of course, the addition of Daniel Arzani, who obviously is of Iranian descent, a player who now plays in my hometown, actually, in Glasgow, with Celtic. How is your kind of experience with him?
Look, I've had a lot to do with Daniel. In actual fact, before the 2018 World Cup, before the team was chosen, I think they chose a squad of 26, and he was part of that. And the season had finished, so he spent 3 weeks with me, just working with me, pretty much one-on-one. He's a fantastic kid. I mean, he's only young. He's a good person. He's a good character. He comes from a lovely family, and he's highly intelligent. I think, and he's a very good player, but I think he has a lot to work on in respect to his physical component of his game, and I think that's where it's gonna be the difference for him. And you would know what happened at Celtic. In his first actual appearance, I think for the first team, where he came there and they didn't think he was physically ready. They finally got him ready, and his first appearance for the first team, he ruptured his anterior cruciate ligament, so he had a year off, and he has actually not played for a very long time now. So he really has not played very much since the 2018 World Cup. I noticed the other day that he's been back in Australia, and he's on his way back to Europe, but I think his loan spell has finished with Celtic. So, as with all young players, the next little while is going to be very, very important for him to see how he goes. But I do think he's got all the skill, but the modern football game, you need to be physically right as well. And so there's a little bit of work for him to do there. And I know he's working hard at that. And I do hope for him that he has a very good career, because he's a very good character. And very proud Iranian. Can I say that too? He's a very proud Iranian. Even though he chose, he's played for Australia and that, he's proud of his Iran heritage, and as are all the Iran people I know, because there's quite a number of them in Australia. In actual fact, my neighbour is from Iran. So yeah, so we have quite a number of Iranians in my city.
He's a young kid as well, as you said, and hopefully he'll recover from the injury, because as you said, it's been a long time, and the fact that City obviously brought him in shows how much they believe in his talents. And again, with probably another loan move or two, he'll not just regain the form that he had, but develop into a player that we think he can be.
On my my course I'm on just now, one of the players from Celtic, Johnny Hayes, who played for Ireland, I was speaking to him about how Arzani's getting on, and he was saying, obviously he's at Man City just now, he'll go back there. But one of the things that he was saying is, like, technical ability of Arzani is one of the best at the club, and that's a club where they've got like players like James Forrest and Ryan Christie, some top players. But to say that from a guy like Johnny Hayes, who's played at national team level, to say that he's got a really high level of technical ability, it's a great, so it's really, and it's obviously something that Man City have seen in him, that they've signed him from Australia.
Yeah, and I've seen that close up. I'm a little bit tough on Daniel, because I believe in him so much, and I really like him so much, and I've been quite strong with him. Even to this day, I'll write to him about getting himself physically right. And look, he's going to have enough people advising him that now, and if he gets that right, he'll be a sensational player.
Of course, after the World Cup ended, then you left your role with the Australian national team, and then, as we know, you started working with the Iranian national team ahead of the 2019 Asian Cup. How did that role come about? Were you already in contact with Carlos Queiroz or his staff, or was it something that, like, was there an introduction made by a kind of mutual?
Well, I'd been in contact with them for a fair while, because one of my very good friends is Mick McDermott, who has been an assistant of Carlos and worked with Carlos for a number of years, and then went back in and worked with Iran at the World Cup. And so Carlos was there. Mick was working with Carlos. And so we started speaking about that. And they had a good sports science and sports medicine team. Diego from Argentina was there, and some fantastic people from Portugal as well working for the team. Great physiotherapist, Mikhail, and a really good coaching staff in general. So it was just the conversation that for a big tournament like that there was the opportunity for me to add some value, to help the performance team, and I jumped at the opportunity. And so that was how it came about. Yeah.
And how did the 2019 Asian Cup go? Obviously, you were involved in the team. As we know, we ended up getting knocked out by Japan in that infamous game, losing 3-0. But before the tournament, and even as the tournament started, Iran was touted to be the favourites. And of course, with the results going so well, we were expecting Iran to reach the final. How was it looking from the psychological point of view? And of course, it might be the kind of the responsibility of the coaching staff to keep the players on the ground and make sure they don't kind of get too complacent. But how did you get involved in that side of things and preparing the team? Because obviously, considering the games come thick and fast, and as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of your responsibility to make sure they're always fresh and up to the game. But tell us a little more about that, and of course in the tournament as well.
Yeah, well, it started. We started early, and we were based in Qatar, and we had a very, very good preparation, very hard working preparation with the team. I was most impressed with all aspects of the team, from the personalities and the character and the willingness to work. And Carlos Queiroz is an absolute incredible coach, incredible mentor, and incredible leader that those players just, from my view, adored. And he knew those players so well and knew how to prepare them for everything and lead them for whatever needed to be done, and also to lead his staff. I don't think I've ever worked harder than I did for those 8 weeks. I can't remember having much sleep, because that's how Carlos works. There is no detail that he leaves unturned. And I've worked with a lot of coaches around the world, but this was even a different level for myself. So that was a complete joy. Qatar was a great place to prepare. We prepared well. They were physically good. And then you put what you need to do, and what I sort of specialize in is monitoring players and monitoring them on a daily basis from a physiological and psychological perspective. And then I really come up, once we have enough data, is to identify where their optimal performance zone is, and then where they are in that zone. So that's very important when you're playing multiple games in a tournament, to identify that zone and then try and keep them at their optimal performance zone at all times, because you've got to play these multiple games regularly, and you don't have much break. And so you put processes in place, and we collect data that keeps us so we know. So my job is to create insight for the coach, so he knows which players are coping with the strain physiologically, psychologically, so that they can perform at all times. So you do this basically with some testing and some technology, and then keeping eyes on the game data and seeing what's actually happening. And they were in really good shape. They obviously, by the semi-final, there is some fatigue in some of those players, but that's across the tournament. But I was very comfortable where the players were. I think when we got to the semi-final, we hadn't had a goal scored against us, and you might ask me more questions about that semi-final, but we went into that. I still think that was the final. I do not think we would have lost to Qatar if that was going to be the final. I think we played Qatar just before, on New Year's Eve actually, and we beat them there. And I look, you can't say it was a very good Qatar side, but very much we weren't thinking like that. We're thinking one game at a time. Japan, very difficult game, prepared very well for it. Even that's what you do. You prepare for each game. Every opponent has respect, and you respect that opponent, because there is no easy games in world football at any level. and you just take time and time, and as it goes on. So no players were getting ahead of themselves. No chance. Not with Carlos Queiroz. Not with Carlos Queiroz. And the players were very focused.
This is really fascinating stuff. And on the back of it, I just have two questions for you, and I'm going to hand you over to Arya. Firstly, you've worked with, I'd say, 3 or 4 of the best performing managers in Asia in the last 10 years. Of course, you mentioned Popovic with that amazing achievement with Western City Wanderers. Of course, you worked with Ange Postecoglou, who I believe is probably one of the most underrated managers across the continent with the achievements that he had with the Australian national team. And of course, with Van Marwijk and Queiroz as well. And we always ask the questions in terms of what is the difference between these managers. But what I want to ask you is, what did you find that is consistent between all these 4 managers, that is kind of the characteristics that a successful manager should have?
Look, I think one thing is that they believe in their philosophy, and they will stick to their philosophy, and they will lead the men in that respect. They like Ange Postecoglou. I think he was the only one that thought we could win the Asian Cup in 2015, and then he will lead the team into that. I think Tony Popovic is very single-mindedly focused, and he pulls people along with him. But then you have a Carlos Queiroz, which, no disrespect to any other coach, but that's a different level. You've nearly got a football philosopher there, someone that will. A football artist, and I watched him a number of times looking at the tactics board and just looking at it like an artist looks at a painting and then might make a stroke with a paintbrush and then adjust it and then sit back. And Carlos Queiroz is beyond a football coach. He's a wonderful man, and he knows the game intellectually so well, remembering that he started the football coaching degree at the University of Lisbon, which all the famous Portuguese coaches were his students. I mean, this is a man that coached Portugal, the under-20s, to World Cup success, and then coached the Portuguese national team. He was a coach educator, so it was someone that knows the game intellectually, and then has the ability to lead. For me, and no disrespect to who takes over Iran in the future, Carlos Queiroz is irreplaceable as the national coach of Iran at that level. Look, there might be great coaches, and maybe that's a big statement, but I'm not sure if everyone there maybe realized what sort of person that they had in control. And this comes from someone that only spent a couple of months there. But I could see, and I've had a lot of experience around the world working with multiple coaches, and Carlos Queiroz will always be a standout for me. And just saying that, also with Ange Postecoglou, he just won the J League with Yokohama last season, which was an incredible result for an Australian coach. And you said he was underrated. He's an outstanding coach. But yes, Carlos is just a leader of men. Those players would do anything for him. They were tactically well versed. They understood. And he was there leading every session. That's the thing that you don't often see with some coaches. Are they on the pitch all the time? Carlos Queiroz is on the pitch all the time. And you know what? One thing that stands out to me, that I see this multiple times, and this is the intelligent. He's highly intelligent too. The session post game in a tournament it's not a fun session, because you've got all the players that have played, they're in recovery. Okay, so they're doing recovery, they've had the game and that sort of stuff. You've got the other players that have suited up and have been ready and have not played. And so they need to go out and do a training session, which is obviously going to be quite tough, because it has to make up some of the training load that has to replace what the game was. Most coaches don't do that session. Most head coaches don't do that session. Do you know what? That's the session that Carlos was most active in, because he was saying to those men, he would be there. We were all there because he'd be there saying, you mean a lot to me, so much to me that I'm going to be here running this session. That's one thing that stands out, with a Carlos Queiroz, because he knows, who do you need in the tournament? If someone breaks down, you're going to need those men. And those men are not happy, are they? Because they're not playing. They think they should be playing. They want to play. You've got to have hungry players in those positions. And so he's there leading them the day after a game. When I've seen, that's not always the case with a lot of head coaches.
Absolutely. Well, that was some fantastic words that you just put out there. I actually agree with you as well. I coach myself, and one of the things I see from even smaller clubs in Scotland, for example, you're right. People leave the sort of easy stuff to the coaches, the assistant coaches, and then they do their own stuff when it comes to the big matches or the important parts. And you're right. Like, it is something that Carlos Queiroz did that I think grabbed the attention of the players. Maybe not so much, when we had Branko Ivankovic, not to put hate on anyone, but it's just a case of the difference of quality of coach. What kind of importance does he put on his players? You're absolutely right. Go on.
I'll tell you another. Can I share with you another experience that sticks with me?
Sure.
Being Iranian and the Iranian national team, it's different, and there's different securities that go around working with the Iranian national team. There's different cultural issues that go around, when you work with the Iranian national team. So, for instance, we had a game. I can't remember which one it was, but I think the kickoff was 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. It was a different time, and it was normally the time when the players are used to napping and having a nap and having a sleep in the afternoon. And I, as a performance team, we discussed this and said, well, we need to change this dynamic, because you want to adjust the sleeping patterns a couple of days out from the game, because you don't want to be kicking off at 3 o'clock when you're normally sleeping at that time. So you need to adjust the circadian rhythm or the body clock, as we call it, for the players to be ready. So I said this to Carlos, and it's not easy with the Iranian national team that you can't just go out and organize something really quick because of the different security measures. So we came up with the concept that basically we just needed them awake to be alive. It didn't need to necessarily be playing football or anything like that, but we wanted them awake and be doing something. So we came up with this concept of we'd have a trivia competition and a table tennis competition. And just so that there was awake, it was lively at the game time. And then this was before, like, you have game day -1 where you're actually going to train and all that sort of stuff. So normally when you put something on like that, it would be the performance guys that run that. Okay, so, and you wouldn't even see the head coach. You wouldn't even maybe see the assistant coach. But no, who do you think is running the trivia? Who do you think is running the table tennis? It's Carlos Queiroz.
Of course.
In the center of it. And this is a coach with that pedigree. And he's in his 60s with an extensive experience. But this is the difference that every young coach could learn from. And I often shake my head and see other young coaches not putting in that and not seeing that. And do you think the players don't notice that? The players notice this man doing this. So then what does that turn out to? They're going to play for a player. They're going to play for a coach that has their back and is always there for them. So that's the difference of a Carlos Queiroz.
It's really fascinating. I hope the people who are listening to this podcast right now are really. I mean, it's fantastic what you just said. It's one of the things that we kind of knew that he put the effort in. We kind of knew he had that kind of work ethic to put in for that, but you didn't know it that in that much detail. So, it's great that you shared it with us. But kind of one of the things that I really want to ask you, because obviously you were only there for, I think it was like 4 months with the national team, but who really, out of the players, who like really stood out to you, like in terms of a psychological standpoint or a physical standpoint, who really caught your eye?
Oh, Can I say? I'll tell you one thing. All of them straight away caught my eye of how physically and psychologically strong they are. I just was like, oh my goodness. As an Australian, I didn't really want to play Australia in the competition because I just didn't want to. You don't really. But you know what? As the tournament was going on, I thought, oh, this could actually happen. And I just thought to myself, the difference in the physical nature of these players compared to what I'd seen before, I thought was quite extensive. I was really very, very strong players, very competitive. Every session was competitive, psychologically very strong, always wanting to train. That was one of the things to hold the players back, to keep them fresh. Who stood out? Well, I mean, how can you go past Sadar? I mean, what a player Sadar Azmoun is just incredible. Mehdi Taremi, incredible player. But then you've got Masood, the captain. What a man he is. Look, he didn't play that much in the tournament, but just a wonderful man and a wonderful person. Ashkan had a wonderful tournament then. Look, I feel bad if I'm leaving players out.
Are there any young players that you maybe thought about that maybe were kind of not as experienced? Any someone that was kind of just joining, maybe that you thought really showed themselves? You know?
Well, look, he ended up not making the team, and I'm not sure how he's going now because he had an injury. But Golly, what's his full name? And he plays in Belgium.
What is that?
Yes. I mean, I'm not sure how he's progressing, but he is some incredible.
He's doing really well. He's doing really well.
He's an incredible player. I'm just trying to think. They were also, so hardworking and so good.
Not to put you on the spot or anything like that.
Pardon?
Not to put you on the spot, but it's just.
I mean, the other one I was very impressed with was the goalkeeper. He I think is, and I'm not sure how again he's progressed, but I think has he just signed with the team in Belgium?
Yeah, so he'll be moving to Antwerp in July, hopefully, if it gets sorted out.
Yeah, well, I think he's probably the best goalkeeper in Asia from what I saw. I thought he was incredible. But yeah, there was
better than Matty Ryan.
It's an interesting one. I think Matty Ryan
thinks Matty Ryan's better than Bezan.
It's because he's one of my favourite keepers in the Premier League. He had a bit of an error last week, but other than that, I think as far as shots concerned, I think he's really good.
Yeah, look, I think Matty Ryan is an outstanding keeper, outstanding person as well. So let's say, okay, and but I think. I think potentially equal to Matty Ryan. I think so. I think he has something. It just depends if he can go on to that next level. That's the thing. But Matty has been fantastic at Brighton, so it's hard to say. And he has really stepped forward in the last couple of years. But I was most impressed with the goalkeeper. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of young players coming through that. Are going to be there for an extensive amount of time. I think Iran's going to be strong.
The question that I've got for you, Doctor, is, again, going back to the sports science kind of subjects, how much do you think this is being exploited or kind of looked into in Asia as a whole? I know you've only worked with Australia and the Iranian national team, but do you think it's something that should be kind of considered more seriously across the continent as a whole? Because I don't think a lot of countries are looking into it and kind of making the most out of it as much as they should be, or at least in comparison with Europe and European clubs and countries.
Yeah, 100%. And also, let me say, there's sports science and then there's sports science. There's sports science that is okay, and then there is sports science that can make a real difference. And that's what I think Asia requires. And there's a lot of teams that could be far superior if they were managed really well in respect to like a holistic human performance perspective. Because there is travel, there is heat, there is some of these emerging countries. If they got a really good sports science program in, they got their players physically right, they had them strong, fit, psychologically right. If that was all managed, that it would make it. They would make great grounds moving forward. I believe like the Thailands, the Vietnam, the Malaysia, all these teams could progress extensively. But I will also say I do believe the teams such as Japan could progress. In saying that, I've started working with a J League team, consulting to a J League team and putting our monitoring system in there, which hasn't been done before. So managing the fatigue of those players, a lot of countries use GPS, but do they use a GPS right to really analyze players and to make a real difference? So I think a lot of these countries through Asia, and I will say through the world, can, with top-level sports science, really progress. And but particularly in Asia, I would like to see that happen. I would like the AFC to do something about that, especially for the lower level nations. We could come out and offer them something and just education to make it better. Look, I know even in Iran that some wonderful people from the universities there write to me, and I know that they are doing good things, but there could be more education just to help and to show ways that haven't been shown before. So for instance, like I've been using GPS since 2002, and Australia's always been a leader in sports science because we've had to be, it's one area, to minimize the risk of injury and maximize performance. So we've had very good educational programs throughout the years here. So yeah, I absolutely believe it's one area that could be improved throughout the Asian region.
And I think to put that into context as well, you mentioned GPS. That was, as far as I'm aware, it was officially introduced to the national team setup by Queiroz. So you're talking after 2011, whereas you said yourself, that was maybe looked into and used in Australia from 2002, which again, it I think for me shows how far behind Iranian football were in that side of things prior to Queiroz coming in. And again, it shows how far he's took the national team and just our football altogether.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the other thing is you've never seen work ethic like a Carlos Queiroz. And the way he drives his staff. The boys, they just work so hard. His coaching staff, who are fantastic staff, all of them. And it was very, very good people involved. I mean, that's why one thing that the Iranian people should know, that how just passionate the staff were for that Iran national team. And I'm in regular contact with the head of physio, Mikhail, that is now with Colombia with Carlos, and Joe, that was his analyst, and all the staff that are around. And they all still talk and have such passion for Iran. And that's a nice thing.
Have you got any other interesting stories or experiences during that period, whether it's with Carlos Queiroz or the team as a whole, that you have in there?
Well, I suppose the thing that really hit me was the support, just how passionate the Iranian people were, and how still to this day Iranian people write to me. And I was with the team such a relative short time, but I was so proud to actually do the work for Iran. I just realized that. But there's another thing that stands out in my mind. I think, was it the round of 16 game when we played was it Oman? I think we played Oman in the round of 16.
Yes,
and they
quarterfinals, I think.
Yeah, and they got a penalty in the first 2 minutes. Do you remember that? And
absolutely.
So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, they've got a penalty in the first 2 minutes. They score. We've got a long period of time. and we'll be okay. But I was sitting near the manager and I think Iranian manager and a lovely man and a couple of the Iranian staff, so the Iranian crew that was sitting near me. Anyway, the penalty's taken and it was a fantastic save. So he saves it. I turn to my right and I see the Iranian staff with tears coming down their face. And I went to myself, wow, this passion for this nation is beautiful. It means so much to them. And I realized that I had that, but that really stuck with me, just how important that was. And it still makes me feel, it was very fortunate for me to be involved in that. I wish we could have won the tournament for the people of Iran, which would have just been a wonderful story. But that was it. And the passion, I think, where I was more thinking, okay, if it goes in, we've got a period of time, just focus on that. But that was a really nice thing I saw.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us. It's something that we've always wanted to hear, and it's brilliant that it's come from someone who's obviously been closely working with the national team for in a tournament like the Asian Cup. And we've got a few more questions before we kind of go on to the fan questions. One of the things I just want to ask you is about your kind of thoughts on the national team in the future. Obviously, we've brought in Dragan Skocic, the Croatian coach, a guy who's obviously worked in Iran for a number of years. What do you think? How do you think Iran will go on from now on?
Look, I don't know much about the coach, so I wish him the best of luck. And I actually just looked him up the other day just to look some of his background, and it seems quite positive, and I wish him all the best. I do know working for any federation has its difficulties, and the Iran Federation, I'm sure they were very kind to me and very nice, but I'm sure it needs a very strong coach to get things done. There was always difficulties working with federations, and also it's a group of players that are very respectful and but very good, and that team deserves the very best. Because an Iran team under a very, very good coach like Carlos, you can just see in the 2018 World Cup, if a few things went a different way, you can think, how far can Iran go? So those sort of things. So look, the players, the pedigree of the players is there. So I think it will be just interesting to see how it does go over the next little period of time.
And so what's next for you then, Dr. Craig, Duncan? What kind of things are we expecting from you in your future as a sports scientist?
Well, look, I really, the focus I really do now is consult to a number of teams around the world, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the education component of coming into nations and trying to help the people in those nations to be better in the sports science field. And most recently, I've been working with a Japanese team, Shimizu S-Pulse, and rather than going there and bringing foreign people in, working with the staff that's already there and trying to help them to be the best they can be, and if there's any knowledge I can give to them to help that. So I do that, but we have a couple of teams in Australia we also work with, and there's quite a lot going on for me. But I'm always looking for if it is a national team or if it's another team, there are projects that I do enjoy. I like to be with a team at the Asian Cup or a World Cup. So it just depends what's going on. I still stay in contact very much with Carlos and the staff there and help them where I can at Colombia. But who knows what happens in the future? I do like a challenge, and I do like working for nations. I do like international football. So yeah, but it has to be the right nation.
Absolutely.
Just before you go into the fan question, I'd just like to ask you about the Australian national team, of course, with Graham Arnold now being in charge. How do you think they're developing? Of course, he's only been with the team recently, but I know he's got past experience of being in the national team setup. But how are you finding that development between the two of them?
Look, I think they progressed okay during this period of time. They had a poor Asian Cup. I think we have to be honest there. If you come off 2015 winning an Asian Cup and then you get knocked out in the quarterfinal, and they're actually lucky it was only because of Matt Ryan that they got through to the quarterfinal. So they could have gone in the round of 16. I think they got through on penalties. I think they really struggled at that Asian Cup. He's been a very good club coach, and I think he's doing some good things. They're promoting different players and that sort of stuff. Look, it's for any coach for the Australian national team. It's difficult. Asia is just difficult, and it depends who comes in their group in the next phase once they get through this phase. But look, he's a good coach. There's a good staff there. There's still very good players, and there's good players up and coming, but I just know Asia's getting more and more difficult. So as an Australian, of course, I hope for the best and that we qualify for 2022. We qualified for the Olympics, so they did a good job. Graham Arnold and his staff did a good job to get that team to the Olympics. So that's a positive step. I suppose we'll just have to wait and see. But it's a hard job, and I think Australians need to understand it's a difficult job for any coach. So let's see how they progress.
Just before we go on to the fan questions, obviously you have your own podcast as well. Can you give us a little bit of a talk about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, please, if anyone wants to listen, it's just the Dr. Craig Duncan podcast. Most of it's just a few minutes, and it's a bit about philosophy and a bit about life. But then I do some interviews. I've just started doing interviews. So I recently had John Aloisi on, which was an Australian player, certain coaches that I've had on, and there's different people that I have on that I interview, but a lot of it is just this real focus on just being the best person you can be. I've got a book coming out. Actually, I didn't say that. I created this philosophy called self-science, which is basically a study of you by you. So it's about individuals just being the best they can be and not being a spectator to their life, and being involved in decisions in their life, be it their exercise, their nutrition, how they sleep, how they work, every part of life. So it's just very much just not for athletes. It's for every person. And I have a real interest in that area of not only seeing players perform, because I think I've been at the cutting edge of human performance in respect to players, how to get them right to play at every opportunity. But you know what? All of us have to perform in life, be it our job, be it whatever it is. And I think I'm very focused on helping where I can for people to live the best life they can possibly can. And it doesn't matter about what circumstances that they have, to be able to look at things positively, to take one step in front of the other. And I know, spending time in Iran, there's difficulties there. There's difficulties for people, but such great people there. And even for those people, whatever is there, however difficult life is, to make the most of what we have and be involved in that. So that's my area that I'm very, very passionate about. And yeah, so I've got a book coming out. Sorry, I keep forgetting that. I'm not good at promoting things. But yeah,
when is it going to be out? Do you have a release date?
It's with the publisher now, so I hope in the next few weeks. Tim Cahill, the famous Australian, he wrote the foreword for that, and so hopefully, let's say that it should be out by the latest September.
I'll definitely.
I've listened to a few of your podcasts. If anyone's interested, check it. Is it on your website that we can find it?
Yeah, you can go, if you go to drcraigduncan.com.au and just hit podcast, you'll find the podcast there. Yeah.
And they can also find you on Twitter and Instagram as well. If they want to.
Yeah, and that's where I still stay in contact with a lot of Iranian people on Instagram. They're fantastic. Yeah. And that's just at Dr. Craig Duncan. So please do that, because it always, yeah.
So the final questions we actually have from Instagram as well. One of the fans have asked us, his name is Nima. He's asked, what amazed you the most about the national team vibe? If that's a bit of a weird question.
How proud they were to play for Iran.
Yeah, definitely.
And how passionate they were to play for their country. And it really made me feel very good in this modern age, where I do think and I do see that a lot of people, it seems to be a lot of players play for themselves. They were very, very, very proud to play for their country and the people of Iran.
Excellent. And final question is on the Iranian media. Anything you've got to say on that, particularly, especially with the Asian Cup? You know, how it affected the players.
Yeah, look, I mean, there was a huge amount of media, and I suppose that's another thing that someone said to me. I think there's 80 million Iranians, and when the Iran national team play, they said to me maybe 50 million are watching it, and it's very important. Look, I can't speak Farsi, so I don't always know what's going on, and I'm always very focused on my job and not getting involved in that. So I know Carlos had to handle a lot of that media, so I'm not really aware if it was how positive it was or whatever. I mean, I never felt, I only found people being positive to me. I just wish, I still think that game against Japan was 0-0 at half time. If ever a game I thought might go to extra time, it was that one. I remember Sadar had a great opportunity. If you remember, the goalkeeper just stuck his leg out in that first half. And then after half time, we had that circumstance, that first goal where the players thought that the referee was called a foul. And they surrounded him, and it was play on, and they scored that goal. And then there was a controversial penalty. I mean, straight after that goal, I think Ali Jumbush, he had a free kick that got saved in the top corner. And then they got the penalty when our player was on the ground sliding. I think that was controversial. And then like, there was a last goal in extra time when the game was gone. So it was a really frustrating, difficult result for us, I think, because Japan were very good that day. I'm not saying that we should have won, but I think it deserves something better than that, and maybe extra time it could have gone to. But again, it was an Australian referee. Do you remember?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely.
To be honest, I still haven't watched that game back. And Arya, you know as well, there's a lot of games Iran has had, certainly in our lifetime anyway, that it wasn't, and the result was really disappointing and heartbreaking. You know, whether it's the Messi goal, against Argentina in the World Cup, or even going further back, China in the 2004 Asian Cup. I've watched highlights from all those games throughout the years. The one game I still haven't watched, and I will not go back and rewatch any parts of it, is that defeat to Japan in the 2019 Asian Cup, and I don't think I have plans of going to watch it anytime soon either.
Yeah, and the devastation of losing that game was significant for the players. It really was just devastating, and for Carlos. And I don't want to take anything away from Japan. I'm not saying they were good that day, but gee, I think Sadar scores in that first half. We're not losing that, and I still think it was just very controversial. And I will say I brought it up with Mikhail, who was the head physio, and he said he still has nightmares over that game. So.
I actually asked one of the referee educators here in Scotland. I asked him about the penalty incident that I think Pro Ali Ganji's handball, and when he fell on the ball and it kind of went behind him. I showed him the incident. He said that would not have been a penalty in Scotland. So it's just, it's one of those things that, it happens. It happens, unfortunately. Iran get.
And he went to and he had a look at it. I mean, he had a look at VAR and gave a penalty. I mean, I do remember clearly in the warm up and seeing the referee walk out, and I know the referee, like as an Australian referee, and it took my breath away. I had a look at him, and he looked at me, and I went, "Oh my goodness!" and I think the Iranian people thought, not an Australian referee, and then sure enough, it was a little bit controversial, but all in all, up till then, it had been a fantastic game, and I still say to this day, if we get and play Qatar, we're not losing to Qatar. But anyway,
that question was asked by. Sorry, go on.
What could have been? That's life.
Absolutely. That question was asked by San Solari. So appreciate that, guys. Thanks for asking those questions. We're gonna wrap it up now. Again, Dr. Duncan, I really appreciate you coming on, taking your time to do the podcast with us. You've given us some fantastic insight into the actual national team itself, what happened under Carlos Queiroz, and for those listening, please check out his podcast as well. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much, and I must say it's been an honor being on here. So thank you for having me. But it was just one of the greatest experiences of my life to work for the Iran national team, and for Carlos and his staff and the players. So it has a very, very great place in my heart. So thank you.
Fantastic, really appreciate that. For those of you listening, just in case you didn't know, we've just recently opened up a new channel on YouTube. You can subscribe to that. We're also available on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook on social media. And also you can subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. We'll have a podcast coming out soon in the next, I would say, fortnight. And we'll discuss everything about the national team, PGPL. So stay in tune with that. We'll be back soon. Thanks so much for listening, and bye bye.